So your book does, and most introduction to sociology textbooks will do a lot to give you some sense of religion as one of the major social institutions of any society. It's a universal institution of any society. Every society will have some form of religion. Now, remember when we were very early talking culture and we read that the body rituals of the Nakarima, in that very exotic sort of anthropological way, we might look at somebody else's religious structures and call them things like magical, or really talk about the ways that they might connect with nature, or we might call them cults, or we might call them strange. But the point is that every society will have some sort of system of beliefs that is concerned with the relationship that people have with what they consider to be significant in the universe or spiritually significant. And we know that all humans have always had this sort of wonder about themselves and where they fit in society. Do other animals do that? I don't know that we have any ways to measure that, but humans have always had this wonder. Why are we here? How did we get here? What is the purpose? Sort of fear and wonder and sort of explanation of unknown phenomenon. How is the world created? Why do we suffer? Is there a plan for our lives? We always have those kinds of wonders. And the reason why we care about that in society is because it guides the things that we do. Again, we are a society that is bound together by culture, and that culture includes those beliefs that we believe to be true. They are the basis, or they are based in the values that we then use to make some expectations of our behavior, either informally or formally, things that we consider to be legal or not. So what we believe, what is that system of beliefs, is very important for any society. Here's the thing, though. For an introduction class, one of the things I've always said is every chapter in an introduction textbook is a sociology class by itself, a whole full-fledged sociology area of study, and sociology of religion is a huge thing. I don't want you to be so concerned at this level, for instance, in all of the distinctions between different types of categories and practices, whether a religion is monotheistic or polytheistic, whether it is an animism or totemism. Um, those are examples that's worth knowing the details, but I don't need you to remember it. Whether a religion is in its cult stage, or what is a sect, or is it a formally organized church and recognized by that particular government, or what kind of denominations are there? Again, details that are definitely worthy of study, not the kind of distinctions that I'm asking you to remember in the sociology, introduction to sociology. And the last of it, your textbook that we currently use, and most textbooks do a wonderful job in giving you a sense of the most major world religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. And the reason why you get that great amount of description, and the sects and the denominations and the way that they differ in terms of this belief and that belief or whatever. Again, it's not that the details are in question in that point, or that there's some sense of one thing that you should believe or not. It's the fact that if you understand what a society believes, and even if you understand the relationships of one of those world religions in relation to another, for instance, how one may be different from another at the point of historical breakoff or something, it tells you about that society. What is it that they do? How is it that they form their families, for instance? What kinds of rules are you going to see politically and economically? So what that religion system is in a particular society, or the multiple religions that we have in the United States, for instance, tells us a lot about society. So sociologically, we care, not what it is that people think as if that is the thing that it is questioned, but what is it that they think and believe, and hold to be true, because it tells us something about how that society is formed. So by definition, religion is the system of beliefs, values, and practices concerning what a person believes to be sacred or spiritually significant. And that's the first distinction that I want you to make. Usually, when I'm having this conversation or these sociological perspectives, I might start with structural functionalists, but this time I'm going to start with symbolic interactionists because at the heart of this thing, even in that definition, is this distinction between what is sacred versus what is profane. So, a religion is a system of beliefs, values, and practices concerning what a person holds to be sacred or spiritually significant. So, what is sacred? Sacred are any of those things that we set apart from society and consider them to be extraordinary or awe-inspiring or deserving of reverence. It is sacred. That's how we use the word in everyday life too. Something that is super special and awe-inspiring. We consider those things to be sacred. So right away, we're talking symbolic interactionists, if you will, because we're talking about things or symbols or objects that we have understanding or shared understanding about their meaning. And then that tells us something about how we interact with them, how we construct or distinguish the differences between those things and other things. The flip of that, the definition of profane is the mundane, everyday parts of life. So either something is sacred or it's everything else. Everything else is profane. The example that I would give is, we've seen stories of what if someone eating a bag of, Cheetos looked at this one Cheeto and say, I believe that I see the face of Jesus in this Cheeto. That Cheeto, if that is that person's belief and that is the face of Jesus, that Cheeto might be put under glass or under structure, and people are going to travel far and wide to come glance at that Cheeto. It is no longer like other Cheetos. It becomes sacred. We infuse the meaning to it. We treat it as if it is sacred. All other Cheetos are profane. Everything else in the world that's not sacred is profane. Every religion, if you look at it, you will see some set of their objects or symbols that is reflective of what is considered to be sacred. So the cross, the Star of David. In some places, it might be a field in nature, for instance, a cemetery, for instance, a burial place. Some things are considered to be sacred. Some places are considered to be sacred. It helps us to identify something about that religion or identify the way that that religion may be practiced based on how you're supposed to interact with those sacred objects. Again, that comes out into your actions. When we were talking about symbolic interactionism, we're talking about the meanings, and meanings determine our actions, right? So how you dress, how you wear your hair, whether you should cover your head and your face, whether you should cover the top of your head when you are worshiping, whether you should wear a hat when you go into particular places or take something off, whether you should wear your shoes in particular places. What kinds of deference do you show to those objects or those things that you consider to be sacred? What do you do if you walk into a place and there's a cross on the wall? What do you do if you go into a new place that you've not been and simply someone says that's sacred? Maybe that's not even your religion, but you then provide some amount of reverence or respect for whatever that thing is. When we talk about society's culture, one of those things on that list of cultural elements were rituals. So one of those things that is immediately of interest for people trying to understand a society is, what are their religious rituals? What are the actions that they might practice as a society to affirm their beliefs, or again, to pass down those religious and cultural values? So most societies will have some version of a wedding when you get your families together, some version of a funeral when you're saying goodbye to family and like making sure society says, what are we going to do to replace these people, right? Some version of, sometimes based on what age you are, all kinds of rituals that we participate in: prayer before we eat, prayer before a major event, all kinds of things that we do that are symbols and actions, or include those symbols and objects of our religions or whatever religions you have in a particular society. A religious ritual, your book says, let me write that down as the word to remember here. A religious ritual is a behavior or practice that's either required or expected of the members of a particular group. And those rituals, the weddings, the funerals, the prayers, and a lot of times those things are practiced in public ways or with other members of the religion because it is how you sort of do the religion. It is how you affirm what those beliefs are. And so some of the societies rituals, cultural rituals, particularly when you look in the United States, for instance, where we've got a ton of religions, for instance, some of our everyday cultural rituals have religious elements to them, because that's where they came from, even if they are removed a bit from the religion, or maybe people practice the rituals without also following the religion. But rituals in a society tell us a lot about what we consider to be important and sacred versus what we consider to be profane. There's some behaviors that you're not even supposed to have at a wedding, even if you're not celebrating in a religious way. You don't do that. That would be profane. Think of the word profanity, that would be totally out of order, right? So another distinction that symbolic interactionists would make that your textbook offer, is religious belief and religious experience. Religious belief is just how it sounds. It is a specific idea that members of a particular faith hold to be true. Remember, even when we were talking norms or, cultural elements, I made a distinction between beliefs and values. You might value a something, and then it helps understand the statements that you consider to be true. Religions have statements that are true. Um, Jesus Christ is the Son of God, or it is true that reincarnation is a thing, for instance. Lots of statements that are true. And so if you consider a thing to be true in your religion, then it is going to guide what you value, and what the way that you act either amongst your family, your friends, or other people in that religion, or just generally in society. So religious beliefs are of interest to sociologists trying to understand societies. And those beliefs will find themselves, again, in our informal norms and also in our formal norms. A religious experience is the conviction or sensation that we're connected to the divine. And this is, again, easier to understand when you think about symbolic interactionism. Imagine that the patriarch of your family recently passed away, and he always sat in that chair. And if someone sits in that chair and say, you know what, when I sit in this chair, I feel the presence of our patriarch. Or when I was sitting in that chair the other day, I felt like he was saying something to me in my ear. You know what? Such and such said that last week. You may, over time with your family, start to believe and designate and understand and feel like that chair is sacred, because that chair might be an actual place in your home, for instance, that allows you to have what you experience as a religious experience, in that it may be the thing that allows you to have a sensation or an experience or some reminder that you are connected to the spiritual world or to the divine. So the reason why some people pray holding a cross, or rituals that are performed with beads, or ways that people may pray in a particular manner or facing a particular direction, there are belief statements or values that guide what those actions are in order to ensure a religious experience, in order to practice the rituals or the expectations that allow you to make that connection. So we see those kinds of rituals in our society, again, that may have begun with religious intent or based in religious beliefs that aren't necessarily religious anymore. And the example that I always think about is when you go to a major event, and there's been a tragedy or there's been just some need to do so, you might take a moment of silence. And the reason why you take a moment of silence is to allow for people to pray or meditate or generally sort of feel the people around you. And some people would describe that as something like a religious experience, just to experience your connection with the environment, with your connection with people, with your connection with nature, or to understand your position in general as part of the universe. So what we consider to be sacred or profane, what we understand to be true, what kinds of practices do we do based on what we consider to be profane and true, and how we sort of ensure those religious experiences, those are kind of symbolic interactionist attention seek or attention spaces when we're thinking about religion. So that's all I would say.